Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. I know that most of you know me. I'm Dr. Smith. I'm interim superintendent, and I'm so thankful that those of you are here in person, and also that we were able to live stream. Before we start tonight's meeting, I really want to give a shout out to our technology center staff, who spent the better part of yesterday trying to make it happen so that we could live stream in this room. And Peter's in the back, so thank you, Peter, who's running the show tonight, but also the entire staff was here with Glenn Newman, our new director, making it happen so that we could live stream tonight. We also live streamed our student meeting this afternoon. We had over 24 students here, and that was a great conversation from our students. I want to introduce some of the administrators who are here today. Jamie Weber is here, one of our principals, and we also have Dina Marks, another elementary principal, Darla Lucier, and Terry Raposo is our new supervisor of special education. So thanks to them for being here this evening. I did have a number of parents who sent questions in, knowing that it was going to be live streamed, and there were patterns in those questions. So I want to begin by just starting sort of where we are and how all of this came about into fruition, and then address some of those questions, and then I'll certainly open it up to everyone. The State Department of Education, in conjunction with our governor, gave us the challenge and the task in a very short period of time of developing a reopen schools plan. And that plan had to include 3 different scenarios. It had to include a hybrid plan where some students would come to school and some students would stay home, and then both other ends of the spectrum. All students would attend school and all students would stay home and distance learn. So we have the challenge of putting together those 3 plans, which I went over and publicized, and they are in our quick link on our district website. Our district website now, and every school's website, has what's called quick links, and they're usually on the left-hand side in a little box. And the top box is called COVID-19. And in that top COVID-19 box, if you click on that link, you will find all of our COVID-related response items, as well as a link to the State Department of Education. And that's where we're going to be publicizing the majority of our COVID-related things. Additionally, we will live stream as much as we can so that all parents have the opportunity to hear and all students have the opportunity to hear and communicate what's going on. It's probably a very short time away before we start doing many of our meetings live again, especially with the Board of Education. And we will be live streaming through our Shelton Public Schools YouTube channel. So that's where you will find recordings of meetings such as this, such as the student meeting, as well as the live stream links will be publicized on our Shelton Public Schools Facebook page and our Shelton Public Schools website. So the Board of Education gratefully adopted the plan last Wednesday at our Board of Education meeting. I submitted the plan to the State Department of Education on Thursday, so they had it a day before it was due. And on Friday, our Reopen Schools Executive Committee met again. And so what you saw in the majority of our reopen plan were requirements that we have to have in order to reopen schools in any manner that were given to us by the State Department of Education. And so we made a commitment to fulfill those requirements. But the work doesn't stop there. So on Friday, what we did was divided up and put people with expertise in certain areas to be in charge and be responsible to write certain guidelines that we'll have to follow moving forward. So for instance, any of our COVID-related guidelines and trainings are going to be written by our medical advisor, Dr. Dominic Casablanca, and our Shelton Public Schools nursing supervisor, Adriana Collins. There will you use their expertise to put those together. Any of our employee-related issues will be handled by Mrs. Carol Panozzo, who's our Director of Human Resources. Rick Belden, who is our Director of Finance, works with our buses, so he will be responsible to put our plan in place with Shelton Transportation and with our food service company, Whitson's Food Service, as well as what you probably all want the answers to, our distance learning plan. That will be handled by our Assistant Superintendent of Schools, Ken Saranich, as well as our Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment, Kristen Santilli. So everyone now has tasks that they need to work on. I felt it was important now for me to turn my focus into hearing from who makes up our school community. So when we say our school community, we know that there are a lot of different constituents in there. It's our Board of Ed, it's our students, it's our parents, it's our teachers, it's our staff, it's everyone put together, it's members of our community that comprise who we are in Shelton. And so now it's important for me to hear from you what your concerns are, what your questions are, for me to be able to have some face-to-face time and answer some of those questions, try to alleviate some of your fears. And you'll also see that I'm carrying around pads of paper and I'm writing certain things down that I need to bring back to different members of my cabinet, of the Reopen Schools team, so that we make sure that we take things into consideration. So that's sort of where we are in the plan. And I'm going to go through now and address some of the things and some of the questions that we had, which will probably be some of your questions, and then I'll open it up to the audience. So, you know, the main question that everyone has is, what plan are we going to follow? And is it going to be full reopen? Is it going to be hybrid? Is it going to be, you know, full distance learning? And we just don't have the answers to that right now. It's too premature for us to determine a plan. That plan, what plan we follow, is we're going to be following the health metric data. And so if data is going to spike and we have increases in COVID, we know we're not going to be going with a full reopen. And depending on what that is, will determine the plan that we're going to follow. This is a health pandemic. And so the Department of Public Health and our local health director really are the ones making the health-related decisions. We are in the field of education. We take their advice, we confer with her, we follow their guidelines, we follow the guidelines that the State Department of Education is giving us. We look at the executive orders that we're mandated to follow that the governor may put out. And so we look at all of those data points. And when it comes down to the board and I making that decision, we will have those latest data points available to us. We will have those conversations with our local health director. We will have those conversations with our medical advisor and with our nursing supervisor, and make the decision that we believe is in the best interest of the health and safety of our students, staff, parents, and of this community. And that's how, you know, we will proceed moving throughout this. And I want to be very clear that although the plan that we submitted to the State Department of Education had to be called a reopen plan, I beg to say that that's going to be our guide for our operations plan for this entire school year. I don't foresee COVID going away this year. I foresee that at some point in time, if I was a predictor of the future, that at some point in time throughout this entire school year, we will be in a full close, we will be in a hybrid, and we will be in a full reopen at different times during the year, and maybe more than once or twice during the year. So our operations plan is going to be continual planning, continuing to look and write and revise where we are and where we're going. Many questions about what our distance learning plan will look like. Let me first say that Kristen and Ken are working very hard on writing that now, and they are talking to national experts, and they are participating in webinars and best practices and getting feedback from building level administration and teachers. We did get feedback from parents as well in many of the surveys that we put out. I will say to you, we need to do better than we did in the spring. I heard that very clearly throughout this distance learning plan. I know it was challenging for you. I know it was challenging many times for staff. And so we are looking at about just doing that, about doing better, about calling it more than distance learning, but more of a blended learning model, depending on which way we go, where there will be some synchronous live face-to-face instruction with teachers and service providers and students and groups of students. When we first embarked on the distance learning journey, when we look at our technology agreements and people that we engage with in technology and the many programs that we use in technology, there are oftentimes agreements where they will agree to abide by the state guidelines. And when we first went into this pandemic, we had some of the service providers that we would have been using virtually who had not and entered into all the agreements with the state. And that took probably about a month to get everything in alignment. We're at the point now where everything is in alignment. And right now, I will tell you, as early as this afternoon when the tech center was here, they're working very hard. And one of the things that I've asked our new technology director, Glenn Newman, to do is to go to our buildings and determine if we can live stream from our buildings, so that if you as parents make the choice, if we're in school and we're in a hybrid, that you want your child to be distance learned from home, do we even have the infrastructure and the capability in this district to be able to live stream so that your child can live stream in the room, in the classroom they would be sitting in? So we're assessing that right now and determining what our needs are. And if we don't have those capabilities, what do we need to do to get and put those capabilities in place? Secondly, I'm looking at going 9 through 12 complete one-to-one devices, so that from 5 through 12, we would have one-to-one devices. I will tell you that's been in the plan, the capital improvement plan of the Board of Education for a number of years, and we have agreement to move forward with a number of that. We used a lot of our CARES Act funding to do just that, to buy 700 computers. 684 will be purchased through CARES Act fund, and then I had a $10,000 Lockheed Martin grant that I wrote to get us other computers. So we have about 700. We're halfway there. We're looking about how we're going to fund the rest of those. And then pertinent devices that are now in the high school we can then repurpose and move down to the elementary schools and get more technology in the elementary schools, so that if we have to go to distance learning, we will be able to provide you with more devices for that as parents and for our students. Additionally, part of the CARES Act, we're looking at buying 50 hotspots. I know that some of you responded you didn't have internet capabilities. And so the whole purpose of the CARES Act funding is equity and access. And so we're going to use the majority of those funds on devices and hotspots, and then a portion of those funds on social emotional learning, which is so critical, and I will be addressing as well. Many of you have asked about outdoor classrooms and the ability to go outside. And so our principals are working with our supervisor of security in the district about just that. What we need to do, though, is be very cognizant of where we are right now in terms of the weather. Generally, when we've gone back to school in September, it has been very, very warm. And we have had those wonderful thunders. We are investigating right now what is in our students' best interest and our staff's best interest about the ability to go outside. Very cognizant of, we can't put our young learners out there without sunscreen. And they can't have sunscreen put on at 8 o'clock in the morning and us expect at 11 o'clock they're going to use the same sunscreen. So we're looking at all of those things, including the possibility of putting up tents, which brings a whole nother issue about setting them up correctly. Where can we put them? What's the safest place to do that? So I want you to know that we're looking into all of those things, and those conversations are occurring on a daily basis, and they're ongoing. We are exploring all of our options for having our learners go outside. What will student interactions look like? School is going to be very different than it was on March 12th when your children were last there. You know, I look at some of these game shows on TV and it says, never would I ever. And I finish that statement by saying, never would I ever have expected that when I closed school on March 13th, would we be in the middle of a pandemic that we haven't experienced in 100 years. Instruction over the last several years has changed. And if you think of when school first started, we had one-room schoolhouses. And when many of us went to school, the teacher stood up in front of the classroom. All the desks were faced in the same direction. And students learned in their own individual spaces and rarely interacted with their peers. To a shift of where we are now, with great innovation going on in our classrooms and students being critical thinkers and problem solvers and working together. Unfortunately, now we have to take 10 steps backwards and go back to the teacher in front of the room and social distance in classrooms, and have limited contact in those small group discussions going around because of that social distancing. When we look at what our classrooms will look like, they will look differently. The little rugs that were on the floor where all of our young learners went to gather with their teacher for circle time and story time and sharing time just will not happen. The rugs will be removed from the room so that we can social distance our desks as much as possible. The American Pediatrics call for 3 feet, a minimum of 3 feet of social distancing. The CDC guidelines call for 6 feet of social distancing. And the state of Connecticut guidelines call for the best extent possible of social distancing. Several members of our executive committee joined me in our school site visits. And when we got to the school sites, we went into classrooms and we determined how far we can socially distance children in our rooms. And at the elementary level in Perry Hill, we figure we can fit 24 desks in a classroom at a minimum of 3 feet. And so if there are less than 24 students, you will have less desks and you will have more than 3 feet of space in between there. So we're working very closely with our building level administration to put the maximum amount of desk space in between for our learners and also with our teachers. So social interactions will look different. Social emotional learning is paramount for us when we go back. We understand that there have been trauma that have been experienced by students, by staff members, just facing this pandemic, a sense of isolation, a sense of loss. We have had staff members, and I know you as family members, and I know some of our students have experienced loss. And with that loss, they haven't been able to say their final goodbyes or have closure with that. We understand that. So we will be committing to the first week of school at a very minimum of focusing on social emotional learning, of focusing on reorienting your children to school, having them see their friends, and how they're going to have to socially distance in school and what our expectations are. And I commit to you that that will not just be the first week of school. That will be more than the first week of school. That will be throughout the school year. And as we face the challenges ahead that may have us going from a hybrid model to a full closure and potentially back to school and back and forth, whatever that may be, we know that the social emotional component is critical. Our specials will look different. We have been told that to control this virus in order to go back to school, several things need to happen. We need to socially distance. We need to have students, all students and staff at all times in the building wearing face masks that cover the nose and mouth. We need to wash hands more frequently and appropriately, and we need to cohort. So what does cohort look like? That means that you're going to keep the same group of children in the classroom with the same group of teachers. Now, some of those teachers may be our special teachers. And instead of our students going from their classroom to the special teacher will have to come to the classroom. And some of that may look very different. We won't be sharing materials like we have in an art class. We won't be sharing crayons and colored pencils. Everyone will have to have their own materials to be able to complete those projects. In terms of music, think of music. With our young voices belting it out, whether they're off tune or on tune or not, it doesn't matter. But the guidelines right now call for 12 feet between our young learners, between all learners. Any of our wind instruments call for 12 feet of social distancing. So we will be repurposing areas of our schools, such as this auditorium. Our high school students will probably have band and chorus in here where we can spread out 12 feet. So that they can sing and play with each other. We'll be using larger spaces on our elementary schools, probably our gymnasiums, possibly our cafeterias, repurposed for just that. So we can provide more social distancing in order for our children to be able to participate in these activities. When we talk about the hybrid plan and we talk about the purpose of the hybrid is to have to try to lower the number of people going into the building, the number of students going into the building. And we're trying to do that with our best options as possible. We discussed a number of different options, and we decided that the best option for this district would be to divide alphabetically, A through M and N through Z. to the best of our ability. And I say that because it's not a hard, fast line drawn in the sand. If there are members of people living in the same household that may have different last names that fall alphabetically into the different A through M and N through Z, the principals will be contacting families, so because we will be keeping families in the same and members of the same household in the same group. And we're doing that primarily for contact tracing and possible quarantining efforts. Imagine if you had multiple children with different last names and you had to quarantine some children and not others, and they were in the same school. That would make it very difficult for you from parents. And so through email interactions and feedback from parents, that came into the discussion of how are we going to do this? We will be trying to put twins that are in the same grade level, that may be functioning on the same level, in the same classroom for just those same reasons. So there is a small amount of flexibility that we've given and communicated to our building level administrators when we talk about the cohorting and the A through Z. Mass breaks will happen during the day. That falls down as the division of responsibilities we did last Friday to myself and our supervisor of security, Ben Trapka. We will be visiting all of the schools to look at and determine what are appropriate areas for students to go outside with their teachers to social distance and to have those mass breaks. Are there large trees that we may be able to have students go under where they would be social distance? Are there areas where we can have multiple classes outside, taking walks outside of the school, again, where they could social distance and have mass breaks? So we're looking into all of those things, and we will be communicating how we will be doing mass breaks. We do have some students that attend our schools for a period of time and then go on to other schools, magnet schools. Our older grade students go to aquaculture, ECA, RCA. We will still be allowing them to go to those. It would be against the law if we discriminated against them and told them they could not participate in those. In terms of orientation and student orientation and transition grades, we understand that those are tough times for parents, and we understand that those are tough times for students. So we are going to do everything possible to have those experiences, and they may end up being virtual. It is my plan to have meet the principal afternoons or evenings so that families and children can meet their principals. We have a bunch of new principals. Many of them are here tonight, and new supervisors. And so we want you to have the ability to see them face to face and who they are. That may happen in a socially distant outdoor forum if we can have those another couple weeks down the road. But it's important for you to know who these people are. If we can't do them in face-to-face forums, whether it's outdoors or indoors, whether we have to do more than one to split the groups up to be able to accommodate everyone, then we will make our best effort to do the best job we can possibly and do those virtually for you. And in terms of orientation, the same thing. We know that we want to get our pre-K and our kindergarten students into the building so they can see it. We know that we have to do certain things with bus safety. And so we're working out how those are going to happen if we have to do those virtually or if we can do those in person. We know our transition grades, right? Our young fourth graders that are going to be going to Perry Hill School, that have a great team at Perry Hill School led by a great administrative team of Lorraine Williams and Karen Crosby. We know that we need to have you meet them some way. And again, we'll try to do that in person, but again, that may have to be virtual moving forward. Lunch is going to look different. We cannot congregate large groups of students. So large gatherings of students in auditoriums, in cafeterias and cafetoriums just will not be happening. So lunches will be in classrooms, and students will have the opportunity to bring their lunches and purchase lunches and eat those in the cafeteria. And there will be less choice offered by our food service company, and more information on that certainly is forthcoming. And I'm very cognizant about allergies, right? And so we know, first and foremost, when you think of food allergies, you think of peanut and nut allergies that students have. And so in cafeterias and in classrooms, if we have to, we will have certain areas for those students that have significant allergies that have to eat separately. We certainly will have those in place in the individual schools. And we may have to have rooms that are peanut or nut or whatever allergy it is, free food in that particular classroom. And so those are all things that our administrative teams on the building level will be working out with our school nurses and our parents as we move forward. I know when I was principal at this high school and we had school emergencies and we had some of our other buildings have to relocate here into our auditorium, we used our gymnasium as their cafeteria, and we did have to have separate areas where it would be sort of a nut-free, peanut-free area or whatever the allergy is. So we are aware of that. Our building level administrators are aware of that, and we will certainly be taking that into consideration. People are concerned about how we're going to educate our students with disabilities. We are planning on bringing them into school to educate them in school. When you talk about cohorting and you talk about students who may be in a more restrictive special program and still have time with their non-disabled peers to go out and push into general education classrooms, that will still happen if that's part of their individualized education plan. We have not been granted any waivers by our federal government, so that will still happen where students will be in the general education setting when it's necessary for them, as well as any intervention services for any of our students. If we have a reading intervention going on with our reading specialists, if we have math intervention going on, there will be pullouts, as there always ever has been, and we will be very cognizant of using appropriate PPE and appropriate social distancing when we're doing that. So while the experience may look differently and have a different feel to it, all of those services will still happen at the level, including evaluations. I know there were many evaluations that students with disabilities or to determine if a student had disability had to be put on hold. And so if we are going back to school in any way, shape, or form, we know that we will be re-engaging in all of those testing assessments. The majority of our meetings, however, we will be holding virtual with parents. We're gonna go back to limiting and restricting in-person meetings. So while our school staff may be socially distanced in a conference room or in a Google Meet, or they may be in their individual rooms on a Google Meet, we will ask you to participate virtually in many of those meetings. And the final question that I had for multiple parents is, as parents, what can we do? What can we do to support the district? What can we donate? And I would say to you, right now we're in need of children's PPE. So the disposable children's masks that we have are similar to the adult masks. We have had some parents, and I thank you publicly for that, who have already purchased things on Amazon and had it shipped to central office in my attention. We're starting to gather those types of things. And if you know that the government, when they had started to gather it for the hospitals and for different organizations and for the cities in emergency management, the majority of that was adult PPE, adult masks, adult gloves, and adult gowns, and the face shields that I'm wearing today. So if anyone wanted to make a donation, please email me to let me know that you're doing it. And I certainly will acknowledge that and let the Board of Education know about that. We are appreciative of your efforts and of you reaching out to ask what you can donate. And it would be disposable, the blue disposable PPE masks for our young learners. And with that, just remove my glasses so that I can see out to there. So I'm going to open it up now.